What do you understand by mutable and immutable?
Mutable is something basically mutable is something which we cannot change the value of, and then immutable is basically we can change the value of. So let's say, let's take an example of
Sure.
sorry.
You reversed. You reversed the answer.
So immutable we can't change the value of, and then mutable we can change the value. So like string is an immutable class, whereas the normal custom class is immutable.
Suppose you have one POJO class with two variables. One is integer, second is hashback. Okay.
Okay.
So how to make this POJO class immutable?
Okay. So so we can follow two processes. Like one, we can make the variables as final, and then we can create one constructor. So that constructor will only be public, and then there should be no setter, and we have only the getter. And then under the constructor, we can always use the deep copy rather than the shallow copy, so that on the existing object will not be get referenced again and then change the value of it. So we can by having this method we can implement.
What is equals and hashcode contract?
So equal and hashcode context says that when two objects are equal, that means their hashcode are also equal, but it doesn't mean that if the two hashcode are equal, that means that the object also are equal. This is essentially being used when this is a basic important properties when we wanted to make sure that the comparison also happens on a better reliability and a better sense to what interfaces and the concrete class uses. And also
Okay. Suppose you have a list of numbers, you have to remove the duplicates and sort them in descending order.
okay.
How you can do?
If we sorry, I'm going to okay, can we use streams if we for that?
Yeah, you can use anything, whatever you want.
Okay, so we can use the distinct time intermediate operator, and then we can use sorted, and then we can use inside the sorted there is one overloaded a method we can use comparator dot reverse order. Then it was reverse order. So distinct will give you the distinct entities, and then reverse will basically reverse order.
Okay. Okay, sounds good. All right. So okay, what is functional interface?
Functional interface is being introduced in Java. Also, there was also previously before Java. Also, there was some functional interfaces. So, functional interfaces says that the interface can only contain one abstract method, but it can contain n numbers of default and static methods. There's one annotation for it as well, that functional interface. Currently, Java 8 introduces a lot of functional interface like function, predicate, by function, by predicate, consumer, supply, unary operator. Yeah, these are the, and before Java 8 we do have runnable and comparative.
Correct. Sounds good. Okay. So what is a singleton design pattern?
The singleton design pattern basically says that no matter how many times you invoke instance of singleton design singleton class, it always give you the same object irrespective of how you are calling. So to structure the singleton class, we will initiate one instance with private static and final, and then we can also create a private constructor so that it can be accessible with the constructor itself. And then we can create one static method that to get instance, and then inside it, if the we can check that we can also apply the double checking as well if we are working on the multi-threaded environment. So it uses a synchronized block, and then basically we can check if the instance is none, then goes to the synchronous block, and again we are checking if it is none, then basically we are checking whether the particular thread is acquiring. So we are ensuring that only the particular thread will get the instance out of it.
Correct. Sounds good. Suppose in your application, okay, in your application there is a method public void. Okay, how you can write JUnit for that method?
So I have only one public and void this.
Correct.
So public void, some name should be there, right?
Public void is the method what is it? Method modifier, right? Public void method A, and you
Okay,
have to
method.
write the JUnit for this one. How you gonna write?
I think we have one method called mockito.doNothing. We can input that in. There's one also method like do throw, like if it is throwing the exception. But do nothing will do our process.
No. Do nothing is called right when you calling a method and that method is calling other method. For that one you can do right, but you directly calling this method.
Trying to call it this method. No idea.
Okay, how we can start three threads? Suppose you have to call three different services in a three different threads. How you gonna start?
So they said we wanted to start at the simultaneously, or is it like we can use different initialization and can start that thread?
Three threads in the parallel thread you have to start. So you may be calling three different services.
Okay, so then we can initialize the thread and then call like a thread t equals to new thread, and then essentially we can thread t dot start, and then we can have different run method since the context is different for different threads, so we can use it.
Okay. All right. So okay. So I'm not getting. Say one more time, please.
So if we have if the context of those applications are different, right? Let's say if one thread, the workload thread are doing some other task and one workload thread are doing another task, then we can simply go ahead and t dot start, and then we can have different implementation for t run method, and then different run method which invokes by this particular thread.
Okay. All right. Spring Boot. How many ways we can do dependency injection?
So there are three ways. Like we can use setter. With setter, we can use constructor, and we can use the field to annotate at the end auto.
Okay. So what is the use case? When are you going to use which one? Which scenario? In which scenario you will use setter getter? Which scenario you will use the constructor base?
So generally, so if we wanted to, if we have one dependencies, let's say if one class have another dependency with another class, and then particular class have dependency with this particular class. So it's basically a cyclic dependency. So in that case, we can use a constructor way of defining the dependencies. But if there's no cyclic dependency, then we can use anyone. But it is mostly preferred that you can call the constructor one, because the problem with the as and when the application goes, you don't know which module will invoke this in a cyclic manner. So it is better to always use this constructor based dependencies injection.
Correct. So how can you define two database? One is Oracle, one is MySQL in your Spring Boot application.
We can use different entity managers for it, and also we can use different beans. So let's say if I wanted to invoke on some particular condition this particular database, so I can use the rate condition on bean, and then we can define, okay, this is the type of so basically we can define all the beans. Let's say if I'm using Oracle databases and if I'm using DB2, so I can define an entity manager for this particular, and I can define an entity manager for this particular, and then we'll invoke whatever it's required at a particular time.
Mm-hmm. Okay, all right. So, how do global exception handling in Spring Boot?
We can use three. We have to use like three annotations for that. So first is which applies at the class level, called at the controller advice. These annotations will take care of any exception, any custom exception which you are throwing at the method level, and at the rate exception handler will takes care of what are the custom classes you have invoked. So let's say if I wanted to invoke like the source not found, so let's say I can at the rate exception handler and cite it the source not found class. And another annotation we can use like at the response status, and then this particular class should extend response entity exception, and then basically we can write our own custom exceptions based on how many we have defined in our application.
Mhm. What is the difference between component and service annotation?
Component and service annotation. Actually, there's not a much difference. So, as a service internally also uses that component, but it is better to have this particular annotation where you're defining your business logic, the service layer, and then essentially the service the Spring context will do not differentiate between those two. It's just like how you invoking those classes. It is important. So in a sense, those service is used at the service layer, and that component can be used in let's say if you wanted to invoke any particular component, so you can use that component. Let's say class or can inside a method.
Okay. Can I create a REST API using REST controller or using at the rate controller, or I need to use only REST controller?
You can create with a controller, but if you are also annotating it with a response body, then basically it does works in a both way. But let's say if you wanted to use only the controller, then essentially you need to define the view resolver around it, and then view resolver, what it does is like essentially uh, the best part with the REST controller is that whatever the responsibility we are expected to it have, it always be in the format of XML and JSON. But with the controller, it always requires a resolver. The view resolver will takes care of what this particular, let's say if you are resolving into a view, let's say ABC, then ABC.jsp or ABC.html should be there in order that particular view to be resolved for the client to see the data.
Okay, all right. So in Hibernate, are you familiar?
Yeah.
Hibernate or Spring JPA, anything?
Spring JPA I'm familiar, but Hibernate I bit alone.
Okay. How we define entity class?
We can use at the entity, and then inside at the class level, and then I can also have to use at the table, and then define the database table which you wanted to use, and then inside it there's columns. Like if you wanted to define some columns at the columns, if you wanted to do any mapping sort of things, like at the rate one to many, many to one mapping, one-to-one mapping. So those annotations can be used across with the columns.
Okay. So what is lazy and eager loading?
Eager loading is basically let's say if you wanted, let's take an example of get method of the Hibernate. So it is a eager loaded, whereas the load method is a lazy loaded. So essentially what it means, like whenever you are sure that the data is there, so basically every hit you call with the get method, it always hit the database irrespective whether you are accessing it or not. But with the lazy loading, what it internally uses proxies, and then the proxy will, let's say, once you call it, the proxy will be loaded. But the best part is like it is only be invoked when you actually call this particular method. If not, then it will stay there and then it will wait for. So it is basically improves the performance as well. In some condition, but not in others.
Mm. Okay. All right. So what is named query?
A named query. There's one annotations basically used. So these are used in the Hibernate, and then at the rate named queries, and then you provide the name. So let's say if I have a person and entity, and then person, let's say person dot find all, and then essentially with the value you can define your queries, and then you can write your own method inside it. So it's an annotation which helps you to define the queries.
Correct. Can we still use the native database query, or we just need to use the JPQL or
No, we
HQL
can.
only?
No, we can use with the native queue equals to true. We can use that with this particular parameter at the under.
So then how are we going to map our response into the POJO class?
So it does not make sure that. So basically, it return you the object, and you have to be well versed with how many parameters you are going to get and what is the internal structure of it, because it is not defining the entity, so you are not sure what actually it is basically giving to us. So you can define your simple old POJO, and then it will do the work for you.
Okay. Okay, sounds good. So which database you are familiar?
A DB2 and Oracle.
Okay. What is the group by clause?
So group by basically used when you wanted to group by some columns. Let's say if I wanted to group the list of employee based on the particular salary, let's say particular department, so I can group those employees based on the group by columns. So I can define like group by and then the column name. Select employee and whatever the employee name, and then from table, and then group by and whatever the columns you want to group by to.
Correct. Microservices. How many ways we can communicate between two microservices?
We can communicate via synchronous way. We can use REST template and Fiend client for that. We can also use basically we can also use a gRPC, which uses the proto buffer developed by Google. And for the asynchronous communication, we can use Kafka and RabbitMQ. And also from the infrastructure side, if you wanted to do that, there's one infrastructure like service mesh also is present. You can also communicate via that as
well. Okay, sounds good. So what is API gateway?
API gateway is a single entry point where all your context of the underlying applications are present. So whenever the request comes in, so it basically works on the front controller design pattern. All the request which comes to that particular controller will be invoked based on the context it provides to different application microservices it defines.
Okay, all right. So when you're calling REST using REST API, right? When you're making calls, so you need the URL of second microservice. Are you hardcoding the second microservice URL, or what you doing?
Come again. Sorry, I didn't.
You need a URL to call the second microservice, right?
Correct.
Are you hardcoding that URL, or something else you're doing?
So currently we are hard coding, but in our previous project we are using Eureka for that, for service discovery. So we are using the name of it instead of the whole host.
Correct. So if you're making multiple calls, right? A calling B, B calling C, C calling D, and if one of the microservices is down, how are you going to handle this failure scenario?
So we are currently using different design pattern for them. So in our one of the segment we are using the circuit breaker design pattern. which basically has three states. Like if it is closed, then all the services are basically working. Let's say C service is not working, so it basically open out the connection and then all the request is not going in. And then there's a fallback method which is being written so that whenever the requests are not hitting, so basically this fallback method will be invoked. And there's one also retry mechanism we are using in one of the microservices as well. So these two we can use in order to make our services fault tolerant.
Correct. Any experience on the message driven or the event driven communication?
Actually, we just started with the Kafka, but as of now, so I was still going to learn.
Okay. So Docker, Kubernetes, any idea?
Yeah, correct. So I worked on. So it's an enterprise Kubernetes which we are using. That is Red Hat OpenShift we are using. So although we have a different separate DevOps team, but I in my free time I have to go through it. So
So how you creating a no, I'm not getting. So how you deploying your application?
so we are using Lightspeed Enterprises, which consist of two products. One is so this but one product which is CI, which is configured with our Bitbucket. It is being configured with so the deployment. So that we are using Tecton, which is a Lightspeed Enterprise for CI, and then for the CD we are using Harness. So once the image is being ready, so it is being already being pushed to the CD, and then we have
So how you
to.
getting image?
So we are getting image with Tecton. There's one there's one component of the open Red Hat OpenShift, which uses the deployment and then produces the image of it along with the results. So
Okay. Okay. So Akash, I have covered all the topics for today's discussion.
okay,
Thank you very much for your time, and HR will update you.
thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.
Nice to meet you.